Good evening. I welcome you to Strange Nexus, your portal to the realms of the strange, spooky, and unexplained. On tonight's episode, we explore the dangerous secrets of a clandestine military unit known as Specter Squad. In this gripping narrative, Captain Benjamin Kane takes you on a journey into a world where the line between life and death is blurred.
The darkness swallowed me whole as I descended into the bowels of the underground facility. My footsteps echoed off the cold, damp walls, creating an eerie symphony that accompanied my every move. I had been part of this secret special unit of the military for years, but nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to witness. We were a clandestine group known as Specter Squad, and our mission was to harness the spectral spirits of long-dead warriors to create an unstoppable unit of highly trained combat experts and undead spirits capable of handling the most extreme missions. My name is Captain Benjamin Kane, and this is my story. It all began with a classified briefing at a hidden military base deep within the heart of a desolate desert. The brass had informed us of a breakthrough discovery, a way to bridge the gap between the living and the dead. It involved ancient rituals, advanced technology, and a level of secrecy that would make any conspiracy theorist's head spin. Our unit was handpicked for this experiment, and we were sworn to absolute secrecy. As I walked through the dimly lit corridor, I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. The air was thick with the stench of fear and anticipation. We had been told very little about the specifics of the procedure, only that it was risky and unproven. But when duty called, there was no room for hesitation. Finally, I reached the chamber where the experiment would take place. It was a large, windowless room filled with equipment that looked like it belonged in a mad scientist's laboratory. In the center of the room was an ancient-looking altar adorned with symbols I couldn't begin to decipher. Standing around the altar were my fellow squad members, each one a highly trained warrior in their own right. There was Lieutenant Sarah Carter, our resident weapons expert, and Sergeant David Ramirez, a demolition specialist with nerves of steel. Next to him was Corporal Rebecca Turner, a brilliant hacker who could infiltrate even the most secure systems. And finally, there was Dr. Alan Hastings, the brilliant scientist who had devised this audacious plan. Dr. Hastings was a tall man with salt and pepper hair, glasses perched precariously on the bridge of his nose. He had a look of determination mixed with a touch of madness in his eyes. He approached me with a grim smile. "Captain Kane, you're just in time," he said. "We're about to begin." I nodded, trying to hide the unease that gnawed at me. I couldn't help but wonder if we were playing with forces beyond our control. Dr. Hastings stepped up to the altar and began reciting incantations in a language I couldn't recognize. The words hung heavy in the air, sending shivers down my spine. The room seemed to darken further, and I could hear faint whispers echoing from the shadows. As the incantations continued, the altar began to emit an otherworldly glow, and a strange mist began to swirl around it. I watched in awe and trepidation as the mist coalesced into a shape, forming a spectral figure that seemed to materialize out of thin air. It was a warrior from a bygone era, clad in ancient armor and wielding a sword that gleamed with an otherworldly light. The room was filled with a palpable sense of power and dread. We had succeeded in summoning a spectral spirit, and it was unlike anything I had ever witnessed. Dr. Hastings turned to us, his eyes alight with excitement. "Behold the first of our specters," he said. "This warrior has been brought back from the dead, imbued with the skills and knowledge of centuries of combat. Our Specter Squad will be unstoppable." I exchanged glances with my squad members, each of us grappling with the enormity of what we had just witnessed. We had the power of the dead at our disposal, and it was both exhilarating and terrifying. Over the coming months, we underwent rigorous training alongside our spectral comrades. The warriors from the past had an eerie and detached demeanor, but they followed our orders with unwavering loyalty. Their combat skills were unmatched, and it didn't take long for us to become a formidable force. Our missions were unlike anything we had ever encountered before. We were sent to the darkest corners of the world to eliminate high-value targets, rescue hostages, and gather intelligence. With our specters by our side, we achieved success after success, and our unit's reputation grew. But as the missions continued, a darkness began to creep into our souls. The specters were not without their own desires and motives. They whispered ancient secrets and urged us to embrace power beyond our understanding. We had harnessed the spirits of the dead, and it was starting to consume us. One fateful night, during a covert operation in the heart of a dense jungle, our unit faced an enemy unlike any other. It was a rival faction that had somehow learned of our specters and sought to add them to their ranks for their own nefarious purposes. The battle that ensued was a chaotic maelstrom of bullets and blades, with spectral warriors clashing against their own kind. I watched in horror as my comrades fell one by one, their spectral allies torn apart by the enemy's relentless assault. Dr. Hastings, who had accompanied us on the mission, was gravely wounded, and his life hung in the balance. In a desperate bid to turn the tide of battle, I made a decision that would haunt me forever. I called upon the most powerful of our specters, a fearsome ancient warrior known as Sargatanas. I surrendered my body as a vessel, and as we temporarily merged, it amplified his power tenfold. With his assistance, we managed to defeat the enemy faction with ease, but the cost was high. Sargatanas demanded a price for his aid, a price I would soon come to regret. As the battle subsided and we unfused, I turned to Sargatanas, expecting gratitude, but instead found a chilling smile on his spectral visage. "You have awakened something within you, Captain Kane," he hissed. "A darkness that cannot be undone." I didn't fully comprehend his words at the time, but I soon would. In the weeks that followed, I began to experience nightmarish visions and a growing sense of malevolence. I could hear the whispers of the specters in my mind, urging me to embrace a power that was beyond my control. I confided in Lieutenant Carter, who had always been my closest confidant. She too had been feeling the effects of the specter's influence. We realized that we needed to confront Dr. Hastings, the man responsible for this unholy experiment. But when we confronted him, we discovered the truth, a truth that chilled us to the bone. Dr. Hastings had become a permanent vessel for the most powerful specter of all, Sargatanas himself, who had gained tremendous power since the last battle. Dr. Hastings had willingly sacrificed his humanity to gain unimaginable power in exchange for healing his fatal wounds from the battle. Sargatanas, through Dr. Hastings, revealed his ultimate plan. He sought to unleash an army of spectral warriors upon the world, to plunge it into eternal chaos and darkness. And he wanted us, the original Specter Squad, to serve as his commanders in this unholy war. Lieutenant Carter and I knew that we couldn't allow Sargatanas to carry out his sinister plan. We had to find a way to stop him, even if it meant facing the very specters we had helped bring back to life. We needed time to prepare our plan, and luckily so did Sargatanas. Before he could put his plan into motion, we brokered a deal that we would gather some missing ancient texts he needed for his army to force unwilling humans to merge with them, thus enhancing their powers. In exchange, we would be spared and granted a place in his new world. This was our one and only chance. Our journey to stop Sargatanas led us to the darkest corners of the supernatural world. We sought out the ancient texts and consulted with experts in the occult. We trained in forbidden rituals and unlocked powers we never knew existed. But Sargatanas was always one step ahead, his influence growing stronger with each passing day. The final showdown took place in a desolate cemetery on the outskirts of a forgotten town. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the gravestones. Sargatanas, through Dr. Hastings, awaited us there, surrounded by an army of spectral warriors. As we faced off against the embodiment of darkness, I couldn't help but reflect on the choices that had brought us to this point. We had harnessed the power of the dead, thinking it would make us invincible, but in the end, it had only brought us to the brink of destruction. The battle that ensued was a cataclysmic clash of spectral might and human determination. Lieutenant Carter and I fought with everything we had, calling upon our own specters to aid us in the struggle. The cemetery became a battlefield of epic proportions, with the fate of the world hanging in the balance. In the end, it was a sacrifice that turned the tide of the battle. Lieutenant Carter, knowing that she could never fully free Dr. Hastings from Sargatanas' grasp, made the ultimate sacrifice. She plunged a ceremonial dagger into his heart, severing the connection between Sargatanas and his earthly vessel. The explosion of energy that followed was blinding, and I was thrown to the ground, my body racked with pain. When I finally regained my senses, I found myself alone in the cemetery, surrounded by the fading remnants of the spectral warriors. Sargatanas had been banished back to the realm of the dead. Dr. Hastings and Lieutenant Carter were now just piles of ash on the scorched earth. The experiment had come to a catastrophic end, and our Specter Squad was no more. In the aftermath, I returned to the underground facility, the place where it had all begun. The secret experiments had been shut down, and the knowledge of our actions buried deep within classified files. I couldn't help but wonder if we had done more harm than good, if the world was better off without the power we had harnessed. As I stood there contemplating the darkness that still lingered within me, I knew one thing for certain. The spectral spirits of long-dead warriors should never have been brought back to the world of the living. The line between life and death should never be crossed, for the consequences are too terrible to bear. And so I walked away from that chapter of my life, haunted by the memories of the specters and the darkness that had consumed us all. The world may never know the truth of our secret unit or the horrors we had unleashed, but I will carry the burden of that knowledge with me to my grave, a constant reminder of the price we paid for playing with the power of the dead.
This reality never ceases to amaze me. What a tale. Now click subscribe and like this video for more Strange Nexus.